Good afternoon, everyone. I am Betsy Cantwell, president of GoRail, and I'm glad so many of you could join us for today's webinar, Pathways to Safer Crossings, Navigating the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program, now also known as the Crossing Safety Program. So at GoRail, we spend a lot of time talking to state and local leaders across the country about the public benefits of railroads and working with those leaders about the railroad on talking with them about the railroads in their communities. And one thing we hear consistently from you all is how important safe and efficient crossings are to your communities. So programs like the Railroad Crossing Elimination, or RCE program, are helping you all take meaningful steps to improve safety, reduce congestion, and strengthen mobility. So it's a particularly important moment for the program. The NOFO was recently released for a combined fiscal year 2025-2026 round, making more than $1.1 billion available. And applications are due June 8th. So I don't want to take too much time off the top. We have a lot of folks here. I understand we hit our registration limit at 1,000 people, which is wonderful. So we have the great FRA team here today to talk to you all, walk through the eligibility requirements, give advice for your applications. And I believe they'll also be talking a little bit about the CRISI Rail Grant Program as well. So we're really pleased to welcome Jenny Mancino, Transportation Industry Analyst at the FRA, Jenny Zhang, Supervisory Transportation Industry Analyst, and Reagan Morgan, Transportation Industry Analyst at the FRA. And then, let's see, before we hand it off to them, I thought I would take a minute to walk through GoRail's Rail Grant Hub, because we talk about this and I think I've sent it out to a bunch of you, but I just want to make sure that you all see and understand and can use the resources that we have. So let's see, Mary, can you all see my screen right now? I'm going to go with yes. Okay, I see thumbs up. Okay, so this is GoRail's Rail Grant Hub. The thought was to make a clearinghouse for different grants related to railroads. So at the top, we have a bulletin where you can find different announcements about either NOFOs or if awards were announced, so just news alerts at the top. And then here we go into sort of a detailed list of our different rail-related federal grant programs. And the cool thing is that you can dig into some of the details here, right? So we lead off with CRISI, and then the topic today, RCE. I believe we just updated this with all the new NOFO information, and then you can see dates as well. And then we also link to the sites where you can apply to these things. So these are the different programs that apply to rail on the federal level. And then we also added a section on the different Class 1 railroads, their own community grants that they house. So if you don't know about those, it's worth exploring there. And then we also plan to add a section on state grants, because some of your states like Texas or Pennsylvania also have rail grants that you might be eligible for. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hand it over to the FRA team. And just a couple of notes of housekeeping. We are recording this. We will make the main program available to all registrants afterward. And then at the end, we plan to do a Q&A. So just send your questions in via either the chat or Q&A features, and we'll get to as many as we can. So with that, I'll hand it over to our FRA folks.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Betsy. Let me share my screen and get this started. Hopefully everybody can see this. Okay, awesome. We are so excited to see so many of you today for this fiscal year 2025-2026 Railroad Crossing Elimination, also called Crossing Safety Program webinar that we're so pleased to host with GoRail's help. big shout out and thank you to GoRail as just like a wonderful partner for hosting this and just giving us the opportunity to engage with all of you on this program. We're going to talk about the RCE or Crossing Safety Program and the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which we'll call the NOFO, that we just very recently released. Um, I think just want to note the slight change in branding for this program. So some of you may have heard about or been familiar already with the Railroad Crossing Elimination, RCE program. It's not changed in any substantive way. It just simply kind of has a new additional branding and what we call it a nickname as the Crossing Safety Program. So you'll hear us say Crossing Safety and RCE program interchangeably in this webinar. So Betsy already gave kind of an intro for the three of us from FRA, but just as a little more detail. So my name is Jenny Zing. I'm the RCE program lead on the FRA discretionary grants team. We handle all pre-award processes for all of our grant programs. And so I'm joined by my lovely colleagues, Jenny Mancino and Reagan Morgan, also part of that same discretionary grants team. And the both of them are also RCE subject matter experts. So happy to be here with you. Okay, so um, just want to highlight before we dive into the content, I want to highlight a few other webinars, or you can call them information engagement opportunities that FRA has planned. So in addition to today's GoRail webinar, the three of us as the RCE team, we're also going to be holding something we call open office hours on Monday, May 11th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. Um, by that time, we're really hoping, fingers crossed, that you will have started your RCE application by that time. And so we've reserved this hour for you to ask any more questions that you may have thought of. And we'll also chat about some common questions that we're already seeing and hearing from you. Um, Also want to mention that we actually held a FRA hosted RCE Crossing Safety Program webinar last week on April 30th. We went into also some more detail on very application specific logistics and walked sort of step by step through how to put your application materials together. So if this webinar piques your interest, and I'm so excited to see that over 500 of you are interested, I think that's just testament to how important this type of work and issue is. If this piques your interest, please check out that webinar, which the recording is on our website. Rewatch it. We go into a little bit more depth with some of the application materials, and that'll be really helpful, hopefully to you too. So all of that is posted on our website. And also, just want to make sure we mention, Betsy mentioned Chrissy. We're going to mention Chrissy as well. Chrissy is not just a lovely name for a girl, but it's also the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Program at FRA. That is not the subject of this webinar, but they also have a Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, open due June 22nd. And the Chrissy team held its program webinar earlier this week. That's also posted online if you want to rewatch that. And they're also going to be having an open office hours opportunity on May 13th. So just register. You can learn more on our website. It's a very exciting time, as you can tell. We're handing out money. So with that, I'll go and speak a little bit about the agenda. We're going to start with an RCE program overview. We're going to, especially for any of you who may have not heard of or been familiar with the program already, we'll talk about the newly released NOFO and $1.1 billion, as well as some key changes from the last round. We'll go into application materials you need to put together, the evaluation and selection process that you can look forward to, and then how to actually submit. I'll have some important recap reminders. And then finally, we're excited to hopefully have plenty of time for some good Q&A from you. So like Betsy said, go ahead and please drop your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. And we also are joined by some FRA team members who are kind of hiding the background, but trying to help and answer your questions as well. So we'll get to that soon. Okay, so let's jump in to the RCE program overview. I'm just going to start and open it up, and then I'm going to turn it to my colleague Jenny M, who's going to go into more specifics. Okay, so this program, what is this program? So the RCE program's purpose, as you can kind of tell from the name, right, the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program, the purpose is to fund highway rail or pathway rail grade crossing projects that improve safety and mobility of people and goods. So that's really the crux of this program. Anything that has to do with grade crossings and improving safety there, that's what this is for. Many of you may already be familiar with RCE. You may know and love it. Maybe you already gotten some money from us for that. It was established by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, back in 2021. And at the time, Congress gave this program fiscal years 2022 through 2026 funding. So this time we are announcing a double fiscal year FY 2025 through 2026 grant round, making over $1.1 billion available. This is, I want to highlight, the last of the appropriated and really just available funds for this program, unless Congress decides to give us more money. So just keep that in mind. We have some money on the table. We don't know if there will be more or how much more there may be, but right now there's $1.1 billion. So please take advantage of that. Um, you know, the application window for this program is open for 45 days. That is a bit shorter than what you may be used to from previous rounds or previous FRA grant programs that we've done. So please take that into account. Today is May 6th, and so there are actually only 33 days left between now and our deadline of June 8th, which is completely doable. Just please go ahead and get started on that application, because we do not take any late applications. So they're at FRA, all of our applications are due by midnight, 11:59 p.m. on June 8th. There are no exceptions. So this is the case where procrastination is not recommended. So with that, I will turn it over to Jenny M to talk more about some of the program specific.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay, we are going to kick it off with eligibility. So for RCE, the eligible applicants have not changed from previous years. There's a wide range of eligible applicants, which you'll see here on this slide, and they are all public entities, including states, political subdivision of a state, example of which include cities, towns, or counties, federally recognized Indian tribe, a unit of local government or a group of local governments, a public port authority, an MPO, or a group of the entities described above. When we look at applications, we really are looking at two things to determine eligibility. Is the applicant eligible, and is the project eligible? So let's look at the list of eligible projects next. The eligible project types are outlined here on this slide. I'll read through these very briefly. As the name of the RCE, Railroad Crossing Elimination Program, suggests, grade separations and closures are eligible. Next, track relocation, typically in order to close a grade crossing. Improvement or installation of protective devices, signals, signs, or other measures to improve safety. Other means to improve the safety and mobility of people and goods, including technological solutions. A group of related projects that improve the mobility of people and goods. And finally, planning, environmental review, and design are also eligible under RCE. One word of advice when developing a project, just remember that any identified improvements need to be directly related to the grade crossing improvement. So if, for example, you have roadwork elements, make sure to explain how they directly relate to the grade crossing improvement. Next slide. This is a change from previous RCE NOFOs because we've moved all key terms and definitions out of the body of the NOFO onto our FRA website. You'll find important definitions on the webpage, which we've linked to in that yellow box at the bottom of the slide. And we really recommend you refer to these key terms and definitions as you develop your application. Here we've pulled out two of the two key terms and definitions that may be relevant on an RCE application. Next slide. Total funding available under the RCE NOFO is just over $1.1 billion. Of this available award amount, certain funding amounts are set aside for specific purposes. These set-asides are for project planning, the Crossing Safety Information and Education Program, and rural and tribal set-asides. This slide lists the total funding for each of these set-asides, which I'll go through. There's $36 million reserved for planning projects. At least 25% or $9 million of those funds is reserved for planning projects in rural areas or on tribal lands. There's a $3 million set aside for highway rail grade crossing safety information and education programs. And finally, there's a little over $229 million set aside for projects located in rural areas or on tribal lands, with at least 5% or a little over $11 million reserved for projects in counties with 20 or fewer residents per square mile. Definitions for project planning, rural areas, and tribal lands can all be found on that key terms page that we just discussed. We also wanted to highlight two grant conditions that we've put in this gray box at the bottom. There is a required minimum 20% non-federal cost share or match, which we'll cover more on the next slide. And no grant awarded in RCE can be less than $1 million, except for planning only grants. Also, we'd like to just highlight this state limitation. No more than 20% of total funding, which is just under $230 million for this round of RCE, can be awarded to projects in a single state. So that is effectively a grant award maximum for RCE. Next slide. Another eligibility requirement, which was just mentioned, is providing appropriate non-federal cost share or match funds. Match requirements are 80-20. That means the applicant must provide at least 20% share of the total project cost. If an application does not demonstrate the availability of this 20% match, the application will be considered ineligible. So please keep this in mind. Please make sure you clearly identify the source of your matching funds in the project budget tables. And FRA allows cash and in-kind, non-cash contributions, such as labor hours or materials, with a preference for cash contributions. And then finally, please make sure you have appropriate supporting documentation, including funding commitment letters, and you can include this as an attachment or an appendix in your application. We also wanted to highlight, which we've included here in this gray box, you'll see that you may count preliminary engineering costs as part of costs eligible for non-federal reimbursement if those costs were incurred before project selection, but no earlier than November 15th, 2021. If you are planning to submit these costs for reimbursement, just make sure to mention these costs in your project narrative. Next slide. All right, this is a very busy slide, and we know there's a lot of information here, but don't worry, this is all available on the FRA website, and we link to it at the end of this presentation. Really here, we just wanted to highlight some important information about the project life cycles that we use with FRA projects. The capital project life cycle has 6 stages, beginning with systems planning and ending with project completion and operation. We've highlighted in the red dotted box the life cycle stages that are eligible under RCE, which are project planning all the way to construction. These life cycle stages are key for applicants when describing projects in an application, and they help FRA better understand what your project is and what stage your project is in. When evaluating applications, FRA will consider the readiness of a project, which means whether the project activities correspond with the appropriate life cycle stage. We also just want to note that applicants are welcome and may consider bundling project life cycle stages together, so you can come in for more than one in an application. If you do so, just please bundle consecutive life cycle stages and explain the different scopes by life cycle stage. Next slide. Next, I'll provide a brief overview of the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements, or CRISI program. And as a note, I won't go into as much detail about eligibility as I did for our CE, but if you are interested in learning more about CRISI, we have a webinar posted on our website, which I think Jenny alluded to earlier, that we've recorded earlier this week. And that has all the relevant information about CRISI that you might need to develop an application. And we'll make sure to link to that at the end of this presentation as well. Next slide. The CRISI program's purpose is to fund projects that improve the safety, efficiency, and reliability of intercity passenger and freight rail systems. The Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, was published on the FRA website on April 20th, and we announced, just like with RCE, a double fiscal year 2025 to 2026 grant round, making just over $2 billion available. The application window is open for 60 days. Again, it's a shorter window than we've seen with previous rounds, so please take that into account. Applications for CRISI are due at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on June 22nd, so a little bit later in the month than the RCE deadline. And just like with RCE, any applications that are received after June 22nd are incomplete will not be reviewed or considered for funding. There are no exceptions. And again, please make sure to read the NOFO carefully and follow all instructions for completing and submitting your application. Next slide. We also wanted to address some of the key differences between the RCE and CRISI programs. If you're interested in applying to both RCE and CRISI, you are more than welcome to do so, but we wanted to make sure you have some relevant information about the differences as you develop your applications. So up first is the benefit cost analysis, or BCA, requirement. A BCA is not required for RCE, although applicants must provide qualitative information on project benefits within your project narrative, and you may provide quantitative information, but a BCA is not required. However, unlike RCE, a BCA is required for the CRISI program. And we have additional information and resources about BCAs on the FRA website. Another difference between the two programs is that commuter rail projects are eligible under RCE, but under CRISI, projects that benefit only commuter rail and do not also jointly benefit intercity passenger rail or freight are not eligible. So that's a key eligibility difference to keep in mind. Next, the two programs have some overlapping eligible applicant types, but there are a few important distinctions to note. CRISI also has a wide range of applicants, ranging from public entities to short-line railroads to universities, while RCE has only public entities as eligible applicants. So please double check that you are an eligible applicant for whichever program you are planning to apply to. Another project eligibility difference is that RCE allows pathway rail grade crossing projects, while those are not eligible under CRISI. And finally, RCE has that minimum $1 million funding request, unless it's a planning-only project, in which case, if there are only planning activities in the scope of work, it can be under that $1 million threshold, while CRISI has no minimum funding request amount. Since there are some key eligibility differences between the two programs, some of which we've highlighted here, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any follow-up questions or want to discuss any eligibility concerns further. And with that, I will now pass this to Reagan to cover the RCE NOFO and key changes.
Over the actual RCE NOFO and key changes from the FY 23-24 round we had previously. Next slide. So I'll start briefly with what's in a NOFO. A Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, announces a grant opportunity. It gives you details about application requirements and procedures to request federal funding for eligible projects. We've listed the key parts of the NOFO on this slide. In our NOFOs, we really tried to lay out exactly what we require for a good application and the exact format we're looking for you to write it in. So please do make sure you read the NOFO carefully. It'll go a long way in helping you understand eligibility and selection criteria on top of the information your application must include. Next slide. Onto the changes from the last round. You'll see that there are a few here, but actual content of the NOFO itself should still be pretty similar to what you might have seen if you came in for a most recent round. First, there's a shortened application window of 45 days. Again, we've already mentioned, but please make sure that you're tracking the deadline, which is June 8th. Next, the NOFO is now located directly on our website and grants.gov at these two links. It used to be published on the Federal Register, so that's been a change for us. And along with that, this change has allowed us to streamline the NOFO and application requirements. As Jenny mentioned, we've relocated the key terms to the FRA website. We've also removed the requirement for Articles 4 through 7 of the Attachment 2 Terms and Conditions and shifted that information into the project narrative. We've also developed an updated budget table. We've also updated the questions in the cover page and now have an optional fillable PDF version of the cover page. It'll hopefully make it easier for you to understand the exact format of information we're looking for and can even help you catch any errors or inconsistencies early. You'll see that there are new or expanded selection preferences in Section 6C of the NOFO. And finally, we've made updates to align with new executive orders. Next slide. Now you may be wondering what application materials you'll need to submit, and I'll cover these here in this section. Next slide. So as you prepare your application, please make sure to focus on the required documents listed in the NOFO. So this would be the SF424 form and the project narrative. While those are the only required documents, we do also strongly encourage you to submit our suggested optional supplemental information. Those include the grade crossing table, which we have a template of on our website, as well as environmental compliance documentation and any draft use or ownership agreements that might be applicable. I'll also note again here that BCAs are not required for the RCE program. Next slide. I also want to highlight an especially important section of your project narrative. In the safety benefits section, please give us relevant data and metrics that'll help you make a safety case for your project. And this can include like the 5-year incident history at the grade crossing. You can pull information like that from the linked dashboard in blue text on the slide. Safety is, of course, a top FRA priority, so do your best to include both quantitative and qualitative evidence as applicable to support your description of how your proposed project will significantly increase the overall safety of the system and/or its riders. Next slide. There's a lot of information on this slide, but I'll round out this overview of the application materials with some brief notes on common issues we've seen in previous rounds. First off, make sure you're meeting the minimum request amount of $1 million. If your request is less than the minimum, your scope should only consist of planning or education program activities. If you're requesting funding for a combination of life cycle stages like project planning and project development, then your request must be above the minimum. A similar common issue is failing to provide a sufficient cost share or match, which means meeting the minimum of 20% non-federal funding. FRA will not round a cost share of 19.5 or 19.6 up to meet the minimum. As for the scope, a common issue is when a proposed project has received federal funding for a similar or the same scope, but the applicant hasn't clearly demonstrated in their application how the proposed work relates to this existing federally funded scope. We want to be sure to avoid any scope overlap. We do know that federal funding from other sources can complicate things, so make sure that the federal request amount in the SF424 only contains the current RCE funding request and excludes any other federal funding. Make sure the funding request information matches across your SF424 and project narrative, and if they don't match, FRA will defer to what's listed in your SF424. For project eligibility, note that grade crossings included in your project scope must be open and cannot already be separated. or they will not be considered eligible. And also related in eligibility, make sure to justify any and all roadwork elements to show how they directly relate to the safety of the grade crossing. Specifically, identify roadwork costs in your budget table as well. And that will wrap up the application discussion, and I will pass it back to Jenny in the next slide.
Thank you, Reagan. All right, so let me walk you through evaluation and selection. This is a flowchart of our application review and selection process. It really previews the kind of the journey of your application from a high level. So first, once you've submitted all of your applications, every application is reviewed for completeness and eligibility. And again, that, relates, as Jenny M mentioned before, to whether you as the applicant are eligible for the program and if your project is eligible for the RCE program. If your application is deemed complete, on time, and eligible, it will move on to the next phase, which is that number 2 box, which is evaluation review. So that is the stage where your application is reviewed and evaluated and fully read through by DOT subject matter experts using the criteria that we outlined in the NOFO. Those panels or kind of review panels, their scores and notes will then go to box 3, selection, where all of those rated applications are then reviewed, compared to selection criteria, and recommended for the FRA administrator's review. Finally, we go to award announcement, box 4. That's when final funding decisions are made, and you will know because we will release a press release announcing very exciting awards of $1.1 billion, right, following all of our review. If if you are not selected, we do offer debriefs. So that's the box 5 right there, where we can really provide you with some feedback, even comments from the evaluators, and some tips in case you are interested in perhaps submitting your application should the RCE program get future funding or to another DOT program. So if you're curious and you weren't selected and you want to know why, we really encourage debriefs, and you can do that by emailing us. Okay. So now this slide really talks about and previews the evaluation criteria that's actually used from a very high level again. There are 3 overall categories or buckets of evaluation criteria. There's project readiness, technical merit, and project benefits. All of those criteria are listed in our notice of funding opportunity, so in the NOFO. So everything is very clear about how and what those DOT FRA review panels will be asked to look for in your application. They're going to be looking at how your application really meets the criteria based also on a corresponding rubric that we have posted on our website. I've put a link there on the bottom of this slide as well. And you can see really the range of ratings that your application could receive. So all of those rubrics for each of those 3 categories is available online. So please take a look. In addition to evaluating your application based on those 3 buckets, we also kind of have an additional layer. So there's another layer where we really overlay a few different selection preferences, which I'll also describe in more detail in the next slide. Okay. So we talked about, we're going to talk about selection preferences now. So during selection really and evaluation, but specifically during selection as well, we're really looking at how your project may relate to these specific preferences that we have noted also in the NOFO. So the first 3 of these 5 bullets are actually the same from our previous RCE rounds. The last 2 are brand new. So I just want to read the first 3 first. If you are coming in with an application that proposes to grade separate crossings, or close a grade crossing through track relocation, or it's a project that results in what we call like a corridor-wide grade crossing set of grade crossing improvements. Those three are same as the last rounds. You will receive a preference. I just want to note also, we consider corridor-wide grade crossing improvements to really be projects that directly improve a series of linked more or less consecutive grade crossings. So that's what we're defining corridor-wide as. So those last two bullets, brand new. We are now this round providing a selection preference to projects that include final design or construction. And this NOFO also gives a selection preference to existing RCE projects that were selected in the past and have completed or are ready to complete a new life cycle stage. So basically, if you were a previous RCE grantee, you'd like to come in and submit an application for the next phase, the next life cycle phase of your project, you will have a selection preference this round. Right. And finally, in terms of evaluation and selection criteria, in the NOFO, you'll notice a section on administration priorities, or you can call it program messaging in terms of the types of elements that this administration is encouraging. So that messaging includes blocked crossing projects. So if your project results in a reduction or elimination of blocked crossings, that's something that we know our administrator talks about a lot. We know Secretary Duffy is really concerned with. So definitely want to, if your project is about a blocked crossing challenge, please mention that, demonstrate how this project will make that better. Also, program messaging includes projects that are family friendly. So the administration has a focus on the American family, as well as improving the condition and safety of transportation infrastructure at grade crossings that have that kind of high impact to safe movement of people and goods. Another priority is economic competitiveness, so projects that promote that by advancing the nation's domestic energy. And then finally, projects that advance the department's innovation agenda. So another few things to just keep in mind. All right, now going to get into some logistics, how to actually apply. And I'll mention we go into some even more detail in our FRA posted program webinar if you want to check that out after this one. But in general, we offer a step-by-step flow chart of a process for applying. And that really helps you get a bigger picture of the overall grant application process at this link here. So that features a helpful pop-out chart that really walks you through the application process steps. It's not necessarily intuitive or straightforward what you are required to give if you are, or to provide if you are applying for a federal grant. So hopefully this helps you understand that more clearly. Additionally, we've talked about the NOFO so often, right? So where can you actually read this magical document? It is available on the Crossing Safety RCE program website. People often ask us, how do we get all our information about the program itself at our fingertips? I'm not even going to lie to you. I Google FRA, RCE, Crossing Safety, right? And it should be one of the first ones that pops up. You should see this webpage right here. And that's where you can find our NOFO linked. That document is in there. Please click into it, take a look, and read it thoroughly if you're applying. Okay, just some brief recap and reminders. So here, we've discussed what we require and hope to see in your application earlier. If there are other documentation pieces you'd like to include, please feel free to submit those as almost supplementary materials. So if you are submitting, let's say, a hyperlinked supplemental piece, make sure, first of all, that the link works. You would be shocked at how many links we get that don't work at all. And sometimes we have, some panelists have the patience to hunt around on Google and try to find it. Others don't. Others can't find it as hard as they try. don't make us do that. Please make sure that your link works and that can be really useful, especially if your supplemental piece is longer, on the longer side. If it is on the longer side, I'd also encourage you to tell us where exactly to find whatever you are hoping to point us to. And please make sure that that's very relevant and extremely, pertinent to our evaluation of your project. Also include detailed cost estimates if you have those available. That's always helpful to see in your budget, and gives us more confidence in the planning and the kind of understanding that you have of your own project too. Also, letters of support from host infrastructure owners. Those railroads are extremely wonderful to see and very helpful. So if you have those, please submit them. And detailed project schedules, again, also just help us understand your plan for your project, make us feel more confident that you yourself are confident in what you're proposing. And then any other documentation of other financial commitments is always helpful. So part of what we look for is, wanting to make sure that you have secured your match, that you have, if you have other partners that are offering money for your project, that you have documentation of that. So make sure that that is linked too. Okay, and then, generally speaking, we've said it, we'll say it again, best overall advice, please read the NOFO carefully. It is actually a lot shorter, as I think Jenny M. and Reagan mentioned. We've shortened it considerably, so it should be digestible, hopefully. Read it again and read it one more time before you submit an application. This presentation is really a tool, but the NOFO is the official document of everything you need. Again, don't skimp on answering the evaluation and selection criteria. Please provide us with what, we try to lay out in the NOFO exactly what we're looking for. Please give that to us, and that'll make us very happy. And then again, plain language is key. So keep in mind, your reviewers, the three people who are put on your review panel, can really have a broad range of subject matter expertise and may or may not be familiar with your particular project at all. So just make sure you explain and really paint that picture of what you are proposing. And then again, refer to our guidance on development and implementation of railroad capital guidance. That's what we call that project lifecycle stage document. That's what we use to understand internally what one person is proposing versus another. If you can speak FRA, if you can speak in our terminology with those project lifecycle stages, again, that goes a very long way in demonstrating that you are prepared to work with us and take our money. So again, and then the last thing is make sure all your budget numbers match everywhere listed in your application. You would again be very surprised at how confused we can get because some applicants may put one number here and then request $1 million less elsewhere and then put $10 million more in another part of their application. Leave no room for doubt and tell us exactly what you want from us. Okay, so I also just want to show you here all the different types of resources that we have available on our website. I've highlighted the RCE program webinar that we gave last week. That same link also takes you to where the CRISI NOFO webinar is if you're interested in that. We have a wealth of resources for you. And then finally, this is us. Please reach out if you have questions. And this applies actually to our Q&A that we'll start very shortly. But because the application window is open, we're unfortunately a bit limited in the project specific questions that we can answer. So because people are applying, now's the time. We can't really give you project level guidance, but we can tell you more generally and point you to parts of the NOFO that we think can answer what you're looking for. So just keep that in mind, but we still encourage you to reach out. We'll give you as best an answer as we can. And you'll see highlighted our FRA NOFO support inbox. I know sometimes people see an inbox and think that's where emails go to die. That is absolutely not the case here. I just want to make sure that's clear to everybody. if we're out of town, we may not get to your question in time. This FRA Novo support box actually feeds directly into every single person on our discretionary grants team. And we are very diligent about monitoring that. So you will get a good answer in a more timely fashion if you email this inbox, most likely. Please reach out to any of us